Hey, next we will talk about MIDI and how to set up MIDI in different digital audio workstations. MIDI controllers and instruments are essential components in a modern music production, offering flexibility, expressiveness, and control over a digital sound. They empower us to create shape and manipulate music with precision and creativity. Let's look into my MIDI configuration to understand what we will be configuring. And let's start with a recap on my Mac OS MIDI configuration. After that, we will look into iConnectivity MyoXL, control software, and see how the MIDI routing is done over there. And then last but not least, we will start with Ableton Live and go through all the different digital audio workstations on how to configure MIDI in and out for each and every. All right, let's get going. Okay, let's review my macOS MIDI configuration and see how the different MIDI devices are linked into my system. So here you can see all the MIDI over USB devices like TR8S, Moog1, OBX8, Juno X, and Machina. So these are all hooked through the USB or MIDI over USB. And then of course I have for those older synthesizers who only support a MIDI, I have a MIDI bridge from MyoXL. And as mentioned in intro, I have basically 8 ports in and 12 ports out. So that's basically the setup in MyoXL. And then I have different type of controllers that MIDI controllers that I use. Like Ableton Push is one that I use mostly while using Ableton, but then I have Lumi keys, and then sometimes with Studio One I of course use the Atom SQ, and so that's pretty much what are here. Then from the other type of controllers, I have Monogram core module to do some sliders and things, so to do some controlling regarding on modulation or whatever you want to configure there. So then when it comes to that MyoXL, there you have your device is here basically, and you can define different type of MIDI routings for input and output. And here basically the things that go out from DAW to your MIDI port in the device, you can make this mapping saying that okay, this port that I have named like Moog D goes into first MIDI in and first MIDI out port. Then JD990 is going to second one, Virus XL is going to third one, Wave Station is going into fifth, and Mother 32 is going out from 7. And that's pretty much all those kind of old-fashioned and old synthesizers that I use through MIDI bridge. You can do here all kind of filtering if you want to disable like timing and sysx commands or whatever. You can do that filtering for input and output config, like output channels, so you can filter MIDI messages, which is quite convenient in some case. So you can do it on the device level, and you don't need to deal with those in your digital audio workstation. Then once we go further, you will also see that I have in the MIDI configuration, specifically as a controller, I have the SSL and there I have the UF8 that I use to control mainly in the mixing, but it's quite handy otherwise, and I'll do a session on this one as well, how to use this controller with different digital audio workstations. Just kind of a brief and quick overview that how to work with that and how it helps you to do things faster in your workflow with this one. Also, of course, as it is physical device, you get this tactical feedback, and you can play with the real faders and so on and so forth. Anyway, that's the system part and all these different type of things that are dealing with MIDI and controlling the digital audio workstations. And next we will launch an Ableton Live and see then how these devices are configured and how the MIDI is configured within Ableton Live. Let's start Ableton Live and dive into MIDI configuration. So similarly as we looked on audio configuration, you need to go into Live and Settings. And now there you are not working, of course, in the Audio tab, but you are working in the Link, Tempo and MIDI tab. And there you can see different control surfaces that you use, and you can link with Live. So these are like MIDI controllers. Then you have the incoming and outgoing MIDI ports that you can define and activate. So if you want to use something, you need to enable it from here. Like for example, the Stream Deck, if I do MIDI commands from there, I need to enable tracking of it. Same like what I have for Monogram core module. I have enabled to incoming MIDI. And then others that I have enabled is Machina and then Lumi keys, as well as, you know, the virtual port from Machina and Vienna Instrument MIDI. However, I'm not basically enabling any of the external instruments that I have, like Moog D, to kind of deliver MIDI messages in. What comes to Lumi keys, it's an MPE type of a device, so it can actually send rich MIDI messages, a kind of new extension into MIDI in general. And if you would like to use kind of extended MIDI messages, you would need to also click here. Then when it comes to outgoing MIDI, and specifically when it goes to an external synthesizer or an instrument, you need to also synchronize the MIDI in a way that the timing of the synth or drum machine is the same as your DAW. So when you are clicking here on sync, it means that it will send out sync messages to these devices, and they all get synchronized to a digital audio workstation clock. And as of course I want to synchronize all these external instruments, so I have defined that, you know, yeah, enable tracking on outgoing for all the synths that I have, and then synchronize them as well. And here you can see basically all those configured. But this is it pretty much from MIDI configuration point of view. And so it is quite simple and in one way. I think the most important thing is to realize that you are not kind of looping MIDI in and out. So in many cases that could result kind of odd situation. So that's why I'm not looping MIDI in from my instruments. I'm just looping MIDI out from the Ableton, to avoid this kind of collision or kind of broadcast of unwanted MIDI messages. So that's from the MIDI ports, and then Then of course here we already discussed about the controllers, so I have push 2, and then this one, this SSL, is the UF8. They do have good instructions how to configure those, so when you need that, you can always kind of lean on the manufacturer's guide to see that how these devices need to be correctly configured. Let's close this one, and we can basically do so that we add a MIDI track, and then now from here, if I would like to MIDI output to, for example, to Juno, I could do it from here, but then also I would like to bring in the audio. So one way, of course, to do it is that you create an audio channel, but then of course in Ableton you have also a better way to do it, but I just show this kind of a simple thingy now. So I basically go and see external in, and then I'll take the Juno input, which basically I had the MIDI out going out, and then I have an audio channel where the MIDI is coming in. There is a smarter way to do this in Ableton, but I just show this simple way of doing it in this case. And then of course I need to go on top of MIDI track and play MIDI now into my Juno X and get the sound out. Then of course you wanna also understand that what is the channel in which you want to send the MIDI out, and that is also something that you can configure in your synthesizer, saying that okay, what is the channel that it's using to receive the MIDI messages. Then of course you need to have the equivalent channel selected from here. And so that it works. And I'm opening my seed sheet because I have here all these channels also marked, which is a good housekeeping in the sense that, like, I can see that okay, Moog 1 is a USB direct and it uses channel 1, but then if I use Roland JD990, it's actually Mio 2 and channel 9. So now if I would like to use that instead of Juno X, I need to basically change those accordingly. So I go over here, and then I have here actually marked that this is the JD990 port in Mio XL. And then here I need to pick up the right channel, which is channel 9. And then of course when I go over here, I also need to route the right audio channel into my DAW. And now basically the MIDI messages are routed to JD990 and you get the sound out from it. So this is basically how you utilize the MIDI in and out. The MIDI in is pretty much from the controllers, so you can also select it from here. I could just say that I want to get the MIDI in from push 2, or I just want to get the MIDI in from Lumi keys and all channels. Then of course I need to also say that in. Now I don't actually need to arm it, because every time when I'm actually using the Lumi keys, it has been directly mapped to this channel and all the MIDI is routed from here to JD990. Usually I use all ins and all channels, and then it's easier for me to use any MIDI controller to basically deliver MIDI notes and other MIDI information into this MIDI channel. Okay, this concludes our MIDI configuration session with Ableton Live. Next we will do it in Pro Tools. Remember to subscribe for the channel. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Ciao.